Well, thank you guys for joining. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I'll do one last quick uh, call out to scan the QR code if you have not done so yet. Just briefly about me, my name is Brent Neiswanger. I'm the Cloud Product Sales Manager for the Central U.S. region for Rubrik. My role kind of is hybrid between sales role and product management role, um, specifically focused on our cloud native solutions as well as M365 and SaaS solutions. So today, I wanted to spend some time talking about M365 and kind of highlight, what we're seeing in the field, our partnership with Microsoft, and then, how we're going about protecting M365 data in a little bit different way. And we'll try to save a little bit of time at the end for some questions, depending on, how far we can get here. So, um, first of all, just wanted to touch base on, Rubrik in general. So, we're one of the leaders in the data security environment. We have over 5,000, plus customers worldwide. And here's some of the notable organizations that you can see that have entrusted their data with Rubrik. And about half of these, are also protecting their M365 environments with us as well. Before we kind of dive into the platform in general, I just want to highlight the partnership that we have with Microsoft. We obviously partner with all the hyperscalers, but last year took our relationship with Microsoft to a much deeper, more granular level when Microsoft actually took an equity stake in Rubrik. And they did this to help kind of accelerate the joint solutions that we were already bringing to the market together and focus on bringing, cyber resiliency to the data layer within Azure and M365. And just to kind of give you some context into the relationship, we have thousands of customers. Over half of them are partnering jointly with Microsoft and Rubrik. We're actually Microsoft's number one ISV partner, and we manage more data on Azure than any other software company globally. Very tight interlock between our organizations. And then, just to highlight, everything that we do is zero trust by nature. Specifically, when we talk about like what's on the truck today, a lot of opportunities to fast track into, the public cloud using some of our cloud native solutions, as well as, specifically for our M365 solution. It's actually one of Rubrik's fastest growing products right now. We actually protect over 8 million users a day, so need to update this slide again. And then just kind of highlight, the tight partnership. We have a 5-year dedicated engineering roadmap that we've co-developed with Microsoft as part of this partnership for Azure and M365. So you're going to be seeing, us tightly integrating with their tools in the Azure control plane. We just announced integration with Sentinel. And then, we're going to be bringing things to the Microsoft environment, like our security solutions, malware, threat hunting, sensitive data discovery, et cetera. Again, to just accelerate the cyber resiliency at the data layer between Azure and M365. And then if you do have a Mac in place, we can use that as a purchasing vehicle. So one of the things with M365 is that we're seeing it more and more now as a tier one critical application across all the organizations that we're talking with. Basically, since the pandemic, there's been a massive explosion in the data usage in those environments, and we're also seeing tools like SharePoint and OneDrive, being leveraged as backend data flows for critical applications, customer interfacing applications. Teams being leveraged, more throughout the organization. And essentially, it's the most widely used application in the world with over 330 million users. And what we're seeing is, the threat actors and the bad actors that are out there in the world have recognized this, and we're seeing articles, over and over again on a weekly, monthly basis. Just this week, there's an article that came out about an organization that is, commercializing ransomware as a service specifically targeted for M365. And so the threat is, much realer now than it's ever been. And, not many folks are actually, you guys still there?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my screen went away, so I'll just keep going. But not many folks are actually leveraging uh, any kind of third party backup today, because frankly, up until this point, there really wasn't a need to. But now with the ransomware attacks and bad actors specifically targeting M365 environments, they know this is where all the sensitive data is. They know it's where your critical workflows are, and they know it's where all your end users are. So there's a real need to look at this. Our friends at Mandiant, one of the world's top security advisor groups, just acquired by Google, they talk about 365, being a gold mine for threat actors. So much so that the U.S. government's actually come out and released guidance providing best practice to protect these environments because of this, ransomware issues. So we have, third parties talking about it, cyber insurers talking about it, and the U.S. government, now recommending backup as a best practice. And it's not just the external threats, those are all highly publicized, or the fact that, 7 out of 10 organizations have experienced an M365 account takeover. It's also the internal threats as well. So the top right example here is actually KPMG. They had an admin accidentally delete 145,000 Teams users' data. Reached out to Microsoft to try and recover, and were unable to because there's no guaranteed recovery SLA that's built into M365 and the offering that Microsoft has. And simply, if there is an event where there's an accidental deletion, they're going to do what's called a best effort recovery. Typically, that can only go back 14 days, but if that data has been deleted altogether, they're just simply not able to find anything and recover any data for you. There's also the rogue actor scenario, or someone within your four walls doing malicious things in your environment. So essentially, what we've come together with Microsoft to build is a solution to answer these two critical questions. If you're hit with ransomware in M365 and you need to get back up, 5, 10, 20,000 users, how are you able to do that at scale fast? And if you experience a rogue or accidental deletion and have to get back terabytes to petabytes of data, how do you do that in a way that's going to keep the business running? Just to highlight briefly where we sit in the stack in the SaaS world, the traditional security layers are managed by the provider, and they become identity and authentication layers. And then within 365 beneath that, Microsoft also supplies you with native tools in their platform that give you dozens of capabilities to secure your environment and govern your data. And I want to double click into those for a second and just talk about what these tools do and where Rubrik comes in to complement some of those areas. So from a Microsoft perspective, they supply you with the world-class tools that accomplish what we're illustrating in the circle here. Understanding the data across your SaaS landscape, they help you provide world-class perimeter defense to keep the bad actors out. These are tools like Microsoft Defender, the advanced telemetry tools that make it really hard for a bad actor to get in. And for the most part, they're doing a very, very excellent job of securing the perimeter. They also have tools that offer data loss prevention, like analytics around risky behavior detection, sensitive data discovery, AIP. But when you look at data recovery, what Microsoft really offers you is governance and compliance tools. They're more workflows like retention policies, preservation lock, legal hold. And if this was 2 years ago, it may be sufficient to recover customers prior to the data and usage growth and the bad actor, ransomware attacks that are, larger scale now in nature. They've worked for those small use cases, restoring one user, an email file, etc. But the threat now is, drastically changed, and you're faced with needing to recover thousands of users at scale, and they just don't have the performance or the ease of use to really handle this challenge. And so with that in mind, I wanted to also take a minute just to kind of walk through what we're seeing from an M365 attack landscape and how these are playing out. Because we see across our organization, all of our customer base, we actually have a ransomware response team that jumps in and gets involved in these types of events. So wanted to walk through what we're seeing in the wild. So typically an attacker will get in, they'll breach the perimeter through either phishing, VPN access, an MFA breach, could even start on-prem and move over into the M365 environment. And when they get in, what they're trying to do is either steal or imitate your Microsoft Global Admin credentials. And then it's at that point that they, execute an exfiltration and deletion event. And then, you'll wake up to the nice ransomware note. And, you probably are asking yourself at this point, like, hold on, if I'm on, E5, configuring the environment to Microsoft's best security practices, what are the chances that an attack like this could really happen? Microsoft has even come out and talked about this scenario. In March, they wrote a security blog about the Lapsus event and talked about how they're attacking attackers are creating global admin accounts. And they're also jointly doing events with us. So these attacks are a real threat. They're happening every day. Microsoft is talking about how despite their best efforts to keep attackers from getting in, that they are, and that there's still a real need for third-party backups in your environment. The other thing that we're seeing, if we play this scenario out, and you look at leveraging some of those governance and compliance tools like retention policies, these attackers are actually leveraging these tools against the environment, if you will. They're going in, gaining global admin credentials, and they'll change the retention policy within SharePoint from, say, 93 days to 1 day, and they'll delete the recycling bins altogether. So not only is there a lack of performance to restore at scale, but they're also leveraging these native tools to accelerate and expand the attack. The other option that we talked about was preservation lock and lit hold. The challenge with those is, although they can protect your ransomware and keep your data sovereign, an attacker can easily turn it off. And then, not to mention, it takes an astronomical amount of time to recover with these tools. You're talking multiple days to recover 1 to 2 users and 50 to 100 gigs. So at that point, you're left with no other option but to kind of hit the panic button, call Microsoft, and hope for them to help you out. They're going to do what's called a best effort only recovery, and again, there's no guaranteed recovery SLA. And if you look at that KPMG example that we talked about, if the data is not there, they just simply can't do anything about it. So customers are typically left in a bad spot, where they either lose their data or they're stuck paying the ransom to get it back. And then the other thing, that we see is that typically when the M365 environment's getting attacked, you're also experiencing attacks elsewhere in your environment. So Rubrik can come in, not to replace, Microsoft or the native Microsoft tools, but you're still going to have all the, great security perimeter protection that they can bring to the table. But Rubrik's going to provide you with an air-gapped, copy of your data, the ability to recover fast at scale, and drive policy-driven protection across all your users. And you're still going to have, a better together story. So the key is, with where we're at, when an attacker gets in, they'll breach the identity and authentication layer, and the native tools, aren't able to successfully recover you. But with Rubrik, you have an air-gapped, immutable copy of the backups that are moved out of your tenant into a Rubrik hosted environment. So when the attacker, gets in, they can't access the backup data. It's protected, it's recoverable, and there's a guaranteed SLA around it. So just real quick, I also wanted to kind of talk about how we do it from an architecture standpoint. I'll keep this pretty high level. Happy to, have further conversations with anyone that's interested. Just reach out to your, local Rubrik team. But first, we'll talk about kind of how we connect. So the whole process is driven, within your environment. Rubrik runs on the SaaS control plane. And when we protect your M365 data, all we do is connect our SaaS control plane via API directly to your Azure subscriptions. We do a one-time authentication, so we never store your credentials. And once that OAuth connection's made, we can start deploying these enterprise applications that allow us to read a bunch of data and push it back through. Why is this not clicking? There we go. So when we take the backups, again, the data is moved out of your tenant altogether, stored in a Rubrik hosted tenant, and it allows you to create resiliency layer in an air gap. Because again, the only thing that interacts with your data is the actual Rubrik application. So if an attacker, gets in, gets the global admin credentials. They're not able to actually access the backup data. It's actually stored in a physically different data center managed by a separate application. All the data is encrypted. On the back end, Rubrik's providing you all the storage needed from an Azure perspective, and you consume it, as a service. You just pay per user per year. So that's kind of the first piece around architecture. The next bucket is around how we achieve reliability. So the Microsoft APIs, if any of you guys have worked with them, can be really difficult to work with. So I want to walk you through how we optimize that process. But from a management standpoint, Rubrik manages everything through an SLA policy domain. You just set the RPO and the RTO, and you tell Rubrik how often to back up, set the retention, et cetera. And then all you have to do is assign the SLA domain to the M365 resource you want. On the back end, we're really reliable because we integrate with both the app-specific APIs within 365 as well as the overarching graph API. So by using multiple APIs, we can handle failure. If you're familiar with Microsoft, you know that they fail often. This graph actually kind of shows you within a typical 24-hour period how often they fail because of so many people accessing the application. We've optimized that so that if we're taking a OneDrive backup and that API is unavailable, we can fall back to the graph and vice versa. This allows us to be extremely reliable and ensure that you get a nice baseline backup and that the tool is actively backing up data and remains at 100% compliance. The next big constraint in the Microsoft ecosystem is the throttling. And this is really, one of the things that sets Rubrik apart architecturally compared to everyone else in the industry. So when you look at, pushing large amounts of data through Microsoft, you're throttled. Why? Because they have hundreds of millions of users accessing the platform, and they need to be able to guarantee that performance. So where this comes into effect is when you're trying to recover a lot of users at once. And, it really becomes a challenge because you only have so much of a pipe that you can get through. What we've done is actually build an auto-scaling infrastructure. This allows us to handle, many backup streams at once, and we can load balance and spread the throttling across many applications and resources. So in a massive recovery scenario, what Rubrik would do is deploy many enterprise applications, hundreds, if not thousands at a time to ensure optimal performance. And it's all about, how many jobs can we run at once? So to use an analogy, it's like if you're filling up an Olympic-sized swimming pool and you only have a garden hose, there's only so much water that you can push through that single garden hose. What our architecture actually allows us to do is run thousands of garden hoses at a time, drop them in, and achieve optimal performance by, auto scaling, leveraging AKS, and, doing things in a much more cloud native way. What it equates to in the real world is being able to restore a lot of data at a time. So in our recent, scale testing, we can recover, as you can see, the more jobs that we run in parallel, the more emails at once we can recover. About 835 emails per second has been tested and validated. And then about 20,000, that equates to about 20,000 users per day from an exchange standpoint. So we're highly performant, and that's really one of Rubrik's biggest differentiators is how we architect to deal with the Microsoft APIs and the throttling, and again answer that question of how do you restore at mass at scale now that we're seeing different types of attacks in the M365 environments. And then the last piece that I'll talk about is just the interface and how we manage this protection. So the Rubrik UI is built for network operators, the security operations person. It's built for more of a generalist and really easy to protect. We make this available through all sorts of constructs. If you're protecting SaaS applications like 365, it's very easy to extend that protection to infrastructure as a service, enterprise applications in a data center. The main point is, regardless of what you're using, how you're protecting it, the workflow is basically identical. So we've simplified the process, and it really becomes easy to run reporting and governance. And if you have folks in your environment that you want to deploy as code or build as in a more cloud architect, DevOps type fashion, everything in Rubrik consumes its own API. It's all built on a REST API. So we can automate with any third-party tool out there. So Terraform, Splunk, Python, Chef, Puppet, ServiceNow. you name the automation flavor, and we're able to integrate. So there's a lot of options on, how to manage Rubrik, and we have a very simple, UI that's easy for, the generalist to be able to jump in and start using. So that's kind of what I wanted to get through today and highlight. Happy to answer any questions that anybody might have, and I appreciate you guys giving me a few minutes here to kind of highlight the M365 threat landscape and talk about how Rubrik is going about protecting those environments.
Do we have any questions in the room? Don't be shy, gentlemen.
Let's go.
Ryan?
Any questions?
Quick question. I probably missed a slide. In Office 365, what applications actually do you protect and backup?
Yeah, so essentially the big four: Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. Those tend to be kind of the main applications.
Anybody else?
Does it actually go into the Azure portal to be able to back up VMs or anything like that, or web applications?
So we have separate tools for like the Azure native types of things, but yes, we do have the ability of protecting Azure native workloads, if you will.
Where's your actual data storage location?
It's in Azure. We just have a separate Rubrik tenant. So mentioned it kind of upfront, but we actually are the number one Microsoft ISV, and we manage more data on Azure than any other software company globally. So got a pretty big involvement with them.
Physically and geographical location?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
The physical location of the storage, and yeah.
So we're in a couple different data centers within Azure. So we can be located near where your data centers are.
Okay.
We have one other question.
So I thought I saw earlier this is a per user license model. And so what we presented today looks like it's more focused on those 4 apps rather than the native Azure, which is probably a different set of solutions. This today is we're talking about the 4 apps and backing up user data.
Yeah, so this presentation today was meant primarily for the M365 solution that we're bringing to the table. So from a pricing standpoint, this is list pricing. Talk to your Rubrik rep, and let them buy you a lunch and give you a discount type of thing. But the way that we do it is per user per month, and then the storage is actually a pooled storage. So essentially we'll take your user count, the total amount of storage, and then we've got algorithms that we can leverage to make sure that we're doing the user count in the most cost efficient way.
Okay, so these tiers are you call out the storage amount, and then other than that, any other features that are either limited, or are there just sort of, okay, so you get everything.
Yep.
From a feature set standpoint, it's just the storage that is the different pricing levels.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
How about past employee mailbox in OneDrive, and also share mailbox and resource mailbox?
Yep. So we base it off of active users within your M365 environment, and then if there's shared mailboxes, we don't count those as users. Essentially, kind of the way that we look at it is like a shared inbox, or a shared user, shared mailbox per licensed user is included. Obviously, there's like storage that's driven off that, and that just goes to the overall storage pool, but we don't count them as one-off users.
Any storage limits on SharePoint and Teams?
As far as site limitations specifically, I'd have to follow up with you on that if you want to shoot me an email or.
We can get
thank
you the question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If the user's data or the customer data is already compromised prior to onboarding with Rubrik, is there a way you can determine that before ingesting the data?
So one of the things that we're doing, and if you know Rubrik and kind of know our story, we are actually, we kind of view ourselves as more of a security company first than just a legacy backup type vendor. So we actually have tools that are available today for sensitive data discovery as well as ransomware remediation in what we call our Rubrik Security Cloud. Those tools are going to actually be coming over into our M365 solution as well. And you'll probably see some announcements on that from us towards the beginning of next year. So we will actually be able to go in, identify sensitive data within your environment, and then if there are any kind of known ransomware type of issues within your environment, we can notify those as well.
Did that answer your question?
Partly, yes. I mean, you can only, I think because you're only starting from scratch, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
have anything to compare with, so that we can at least maybe run your scan and determine
Yeah.
best before you ingest it.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, so we've got a raffle. So if you haven't provided your, is it,
First name, last name, and phone number. It's an old-fashioned raffle. I need you to write that down for me.
Yeah.
And I've got that, and then so I have your phone number. I will call you if you win. Okay?
Yeah. Awesome.
If you don't have a-
thanks everybody for